In this episode of PMP Series, before you realize you did it, we are going to discuss about the scope management and the scope management processes. Scope management. It is about managing the scope of the project. It involves collecting the requirements from the stakeholders, write it down so that it can be tracked. It is also required to identify what is not a part of the project. As you complete the task, you need to verify the work done with stakeholders and make sure they are satisfied. It is very important to track the scope of the project, otherwise, the uncontrolled changes can cause the team to do extra work. That means your project scope creep. Let's take a look at the difference between the product scope and the project scope. Project scope includes all the work that is required to be done on the project to make a product. That is, each and every single task you need to do on the project. For example, if you are building a game, everything, including programming, graphic design, testing, etc., all come under project scope. Product scope means the features and the functions of the product or service you're building. You need to define the product scope along with the project scope, or you might have to face scope issues on the project. For example, if you are building a game, then you will have to define how many levels it will have, how many different characters it will have, etc. This does not mean you cannot do changes on the project. Yes, you can make changes on the project. However, those changes need to be done in the controlled fashion. We will discuss the change control later. As you already know, scope management is to define the work that needs to be completed on the project, and also it identifies the work which is out of scope. There are 6 scope management processes. Each one of the processes have input, output, and useful tools and techniques. These 6 processes are plan scope management, collect requirements, define scope, create WBS, verify scope, and control scope. Plan scope management is about making a plan for scope management, a plan to define, develop, verify, and control the scope of the project. Collect requirements. It is about finding out the stakeholders' needs. Write it down so that it can be tracked. This involves talking with the stakeholders, the problems that they are facing, how this project is going to solve their problems. Sometimes you can sit down with each one of them one-on-one, or other times you can do group settings. There are various tools and techniques to do the same. We will look at each one of those in detail. Define scope is to define the scope of the project. Here you write down the detailed description of the work that needs to be completed. The next process is create WBS. It means create work breakdown structure. This is most important process in the scope management. This is where you actually figure out all the work that you are going to do, and the work is divided into smaller packages. It includes each and every task you and your team going to do on the project. Next process is verify scope. As we complete this work, we need to get it verified from the stakeholders to make sure you meet the requirements and deliver the right product. This process is called verify scope. The last process is control scope. Sometimes one thing or the other is missed initially, and somewhere in the project you or your team realize that a change needs to happen, and that will affect the baseline. This is why we need control scope process. Here you make sure only required changes are done, and everyone is clear about the consequences of the changes. This is the overview of scope management. It includes 6 processes. At each one of the processes has input, output, and corresponding tools and techniques used. Starting next episode, we are going to look at each one of the process in detail. Stay tuned for the scope management processes starting from next episode. Thanks for watching.